Good morning, welcome to Indie Author Fringe 2016. My name is David Penny. I'm not actually meant to be here, but this morning, Ben Galley is going to tell you everything you ever wanted to know about crowdfunding. So I'll hand over to Ben and ask him to introduce himself and to get started. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you very much, David. So yeah, pleasure to be here. Welcome to all the authors, writers, and anyone else we've got joining us today. My name is Ben Galley. I am a professional self-published author. I'm also a self-publishing consultant and marketing consultant, and I'm also a crowdfunding advisor for ALLi. And I've been a successful crowdfunder twice in my time. And so today I'm just going to run you through the hot topic that is crowdfunding. There's a huge amount, or there was a huge amount of talk at LBF this year about crowdfunding, ways that it can be used, and how exciting essentially the opportunity of crowdfunding is for today's modern authors, both traditional, indie, debut, experienced, whatever you are. Crowdfunding is there for you to use. It's also growing in popularity all the time, and we've seen that this year that LBF, but over the last couple of years, since 2009, since Kickstarter started, it's just been on the rise constantly, which is really, really exciting. So today I'm going to take an in-depth look at what crowdfunding is, how you can use it, and also more importantly, how to get it right and how to reach that level. Cool.
Thank you, Ben. As an indie author, I must admit I know very, very little about crowdfunding. So maybe maybe other people in exactly the same situation out there. So perhaps if you could introduce us to it and exactly what it is and what it does.
Absolutely, yes. So crowdfunding generally is the practice of funding a project or a venture, such as a book, by raising money from a large number of people, usually from the internet or via the internet. And of course, that does mean books. So essentially, that's what it is. It's using the crowd, all the people out there. Anyone who's got an internet connection essentially can crowdfund. And so what you're using is these platforms that are available out there to use those the audiences, and to see if you can leverage those platforms and those audiences, the crowd, into funding what you want to achieve. And that is essentially it in a nutshell. It's a form of funding. It works for businesses as well as individuals, and it's a way of just getting projects done as well as meeting new people. And that's basically it in a nutshell.
Interesting. You said you'd done a couple of crowdfunding exercises yourself. Can you tell me a little bit about them? What were they for? Were they for books, and how successful were they?
Yeah, absolutely. So my first experience of crowdfunding was on Kickstarter, which is the daddy, essentially, of crowdfunding platforms. It is the largest one out there. It raises the largest amount of money as well. And so what I funded on Kickstarter was a graphic novel, which is essentially, if you're not familiar with the term graphic novel, it is essentially a comic, but it's normally longer and more sort of in between, a comic and a book. So I wanted to essentially publish, a graphic novel version of my first debut book, The Written. And so I thought, well, the best way of doing this is crowdfunding. The reasons I decided that is mainly why a lot of people go for crowdfunding in the first place, is that they can't actually, afford to do the project on themselves. Then they might need a little bit of help from, let's say, an artist or another professional. For instance, for me as a graphic artist, a gentleman called Mike Shipley, and they are professionals. They cost a lot of money, like editors, like cover designers, and a graphic novel is a big project, so it costs a large amount of money indeed. So essentially that's what I used crowdfunding for, was to enable me to do this project and to actually bring it to life. Through Kickstarter, I raised £5,500 from, I think, 117 backers. This was about 2 years ago now. Project was live for about 40 days. And yeah, we raised £500, £600 over what I hoped to raise, which is the 5,000. So yeah, really, really happy with that. It was a lot of work, but we'll get onto that later when we look at how difficult crowdfunding actually is and how to make it actually work. But yeah, and then after that, I used PubSlush, which was another crowdfunding platform. Unfortunately, that closed just a couple of months ago now, so no longer exists. But again, very similar to Kickstarter, you design pledges and rewards, etc., and you essentially try and fund a publishing project. So for that, I used PubSlush for my book Blood Rush, which was my 7th book, I think. And that was, again, sort of, I think that was about 2 years ago as well. I raised just over £1,000 for that. And that was basically just to cover the cost of publishing, which is another way you can use crowdfunding. You know, you might be able to fund it yourself, but, you know, it's nice if you can get paid while you're creating it. So that's another way to use it. But again, we'll go on to those in a second. But yeah, both platforms, if I just quickly go on to you know, how crowdfunding normally works, that sort of give you a bit more of an insight into, you know, how easy the setup is, and then later on we'll look at sort of how difficult, or you know, how to get the actual funding right. So yeah, generally speaking, what you do, and this is what I did on Kickstarter and Pubslush, is you sort of submit a project. That project can be anything. Obviously, we're going to focus on books today, but people have funded incredible things across crowdfunding over the years. You know, films, TV, computer games, clothing, everything you can possibly imagine, people have funded it. So yeah, normally you come up with your project and you submit it to the platform, and in doing so, you sort of pitch as well. And this is the pitch that the backers would see and that would go live on the site. And in that pitch, you outline your goals, your plans, and essentially the reasons of why people should back you. And then by the strength of your idea, your pitch, and also your rewards, i.e. what you're offering in return for people backing you and giving you money, and also through the strength of your marketing, again, people will back your project. Normally on most platforms, you have to raise a certain amount of money within a certain time limit, but if you're successful in that time, the funds basically are yours, transferred to your bank account, ready to, you know, go into action, to pay that professional, to go into the project, to, you know, essentially fund whatever you want to fund. So that's it essentially, and it's very, very simple and easy to use, easy to do rather, in terms of the submission process. Most of the work comes in actually making sure that you're funded. So, you know, if we're going to break that down into steps, most crowdfunding platforms would work in the same way, whereby you post a project, explain it, as we've already said, submit that. You then obviously decide within your project to submit rewards. And you obviously have to design those rewards as well. They can be really, really interesting. Again, we'll discuss those in more detail in a second. But as an example, they could be sort of limited edition artwork, a copy of the finished book, of course, even some merchandise like a nice T-shirt. And then then the project is launched, of course. So, you know, if you're successful in getting through the platform, or the platforms such as Kickstarter or Unbound, or any of the others we're going to look at, they accept you, your project goes live. And then it's over to you to do the marketing, to make sure that the project is actually seen and, of course, funded within your set time limit. And that's it. You know, if the project is compelling, interesting enough, the crowd will invest and hopefully will back you. And obviously, if you hit your goal, like I said, it's over to you. Now, there are a couple of things to be aware of as well. Most platforms will take a small percentage of the funds raised to cover their costs. You know, that's also an element of that is to cover the cost of processing the actual payments as well. So these range from platform to platform, but it's always wise to just be aware, you know, if you're aiming for 5,000, a chunk of that is going to be taken away to actually fund the platform itself, as well as obviously a chunk going into the rewards, but it's all within your chunk, that is. And that's essentially how crowdfunding works. Interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here. I vaguely know about crowdfunding, but I've not really looked into it. Yeah. Cool. What do your backers get out of it, Ben? Why would they put money into, and what sort of things do you offer them?
It's a very, very good question. And I mean, that is, if we're going to look at the sort of secrets of crowdfunding, you know, and the ways to sort of really develop it and to be successful, your rewards are a huge, huge part of that. And so as you know, you're putting a lot of thought into what the project is overall, you really, really need to put as much thought into the rewards and what you're going to offer. Because essentially, you know, people will invest on the strength of your project and the idea of it becoming, you know, coming to life. But a lot of people will also just back things because they get something in return. You know, it is a very, you know, symbiotic process. It's a very sharing process, two-way street. So yeah, you do need to put a lot of thought into the rewards, but make them as fun as possible. You know, it's amazing what you can do. You know, people on Unbound, one of the platforms we're going to look at, might offer, you know, a dinner with the author for anyone who funds them, you know, as a top reward. You know, you'll normally find that rewards are sort of scaled as well, especially on Kickstarter, Unbound, Indiegogo. Most of the platforms will sort of have a range of rewards based on what you want to, how much a backer wants to actually put into the project. So it could range from sort of £5, $5, up to sort of $500 or even $1,000 or £1,000. You know, if people want to come in and just sort of throw that much money at your project straight away, which a lot of people do. So yeah, that's it. That's essentially what's in it for the backers. You know, they're getting something in return. But they're also, you know, getting to fund a project and to bring something to life as well. On other platforms, such as Pentium, one of the ones we're going to look at today, you can actually offer equity. So it sort of works in a very similar way to how a publisher would work, whereby you put the project up and you offer a certain amount of equity in return, i.e. When you get paid, you know, your backers would get paid as well. So it's sort of on a royalty share arrangement, which is really, really interesting. I think it's quite exciting because, you know, for a long time now, I think the readers have been the new gatekeepers. You know, previously we've seen that publishing houses, you know, the large imprints, they have been seen as the gatekeepers to the industry for a long time. But I think, you know, with the rise of indie publishing, the rise of hybrid publishing, and just, you know, the widening of the market and the way through the market, I think we've seen a shift of power and gatekeeping, if you will, to the reader. And crowdfunding is a perfect example of that, especially on Pentium, because what it allows people to do is go, I like the sound of this idea. I would love to read that as a book. I'm going to give some money to that. And not only do I get to bring it to life, but I get paid when the author gets paid. So we're not talking huge chunks of money here in terms of equity on Pentium, but it is enough to actually make the, you know, the backers to think about it. And I think that's a really, really interesting model that's very, very different from, well, it's very similar to rewards in a way. You're still getting something, but it's just a complete flip side. And it just gives, I think, more of a partnership approach to a book deal, if you would. But I think, you know, it enables the reader and the author to get much closer together. And I think that, you know, that can only be beneficial, really. So that's it. That's what's in it for the backers. That's why some people would crowdfund. So in summary, yeah, what they get in return, as well as the strength of your project and how exciting it is and how excited they are to see it alive.
Interesting. Yeah. Do you think, or do you need a following in order to start a crowdfunding?
That's a very good question. I think, you know, it is advisable to have a to have a following before you begin your funding. The reason being is you can count on a lot of your existing following to help you get through the early stages and to give yourself a real chunk of the investment, of the amount you're trying to raise, before, you know, people that you might not know, or, you know, organic traffic on these platforms might come along and you know, fund you just out of their own interest and discover you organically. So yes, I mean, it is advisable to create to have a following before you crowdfund, mainly because it just makes it easier, essentially, and you can leverage that following that you've got to get yourself some of the way. If you're a debut author with, you know, only a couple of followers on Facebook and Twitter, it might be slightly harder for you to obviously crowdfund, because you can't just send an email to friends and family, you know, instantly, or call on existing fans to just say, hey, this is my new exciting project, come fund me. And so you're relying on, you know, making new fans, making new friends, and finding backers then and there while your project is running. So it is slightly harder. You do have to work slightly harder, but that's not to say it's impossible. You know, so, you know, you can actually build up a following via crowdfunding of loyal fans that you can then leverage after your project is complete. So that's what I did with the graphic novel. You know, a good number of the backers in the graphic novel project already knew me, and they'd read the Written and my Emaneska series and wanted to see that in a graphic novel format. So, you know, that's why they helped me. But, you know, a large amount of people I'd never met before found me organically or through my marketing, and they are now, you know, great fans of mine that are regularly interacting with me on Facebook and Twitter and buying my other books. So it sort of does work both ways. But yeah, in answer to your question, David, it is easier if you've got a following. But yeah, I mean, I think probably it's good at this point to look at the 4 purposes of crowdfunding, because that's the thing, you know, talking about following, I've mentioned one already. You know, you can actually use it to gain supporters that you can move on. But there are sort of what I'd say is 4 purposes of crowdfunding, really. And you can do, you know, all of these at once with a project, or you can just focus on one of them if you really, really want to. So I'd say, yeah, number 1, you know, you want to raise money to help you start or complete a project even. So that is the main goal, I think, or the main purpose of crowdfunding. Why an author would think, oh, I need to crowdfund. You know, that would be the main reason why, is to raise funds, to raise capital, to bring something to life. The second is similar to the first, but it's what I did with my Pubslash project, is to pay for your time or to pay for sort of the production of the project. So for instance, you might have already finished a book, but the cost of the publishing and the polishing of it, the editing, the cover design, ebook formatting, typesetting, and also, ISBNs, etc., all of that, you can actually pay for your time or pay for those processes with crowdfunding. So it's less about the creation or bringing something to life, but actually to cover your costs. The third one would be to, as we've already talked about, gain supporters and advocates of your project before its release. You can use that, to great effect, because through a lot of these crowdfunding platforms, you will actually gather email addresses, you'll be gathering contacts, you can communicate with your backers, during the project, while it's live, after it, once it's funded, and then from then on, you've got those email addresses and those contact details that you can use, add to your mailing list, invite them to Facebook and Twitter, tell them about brand new books. So that's really, really important as well, especially because where in your marketing you'll be getting your name out there, the project's name or your book's name, so you can use it to sort of leverage a bit of marketing for your general brand, as well as obviously for your crowdfunding project. And lastly, I think one of the sort of more interesting things that you can do, less popular I'd say than the other three purposes of crowdfunding, but you can measure interest in a project as well. It's a great way to sort of find out how many people would be interested in your book idea, or how many people would be interested in your graphic novel, your audiobook, etc. So if you were to upload it to Kickstarter, say, and you've put a lot of effort into the pitch, you've done a video, you've got great rewards, that sort of thing. But it's not very, it's not seeing a lot of interest, it's not seeing a lot of funds raised. You might be able to take from that, well, actually, maybe I need to tweak this idea. Maybe it's not strong enough. Maybe this project doesn't have enough interest in it. So you can actually use it as a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, sort of customer interaction, bit of customer research or market research to figure out whether actually, is this idea commercial enough? And I think that's a really interesting way to use crowdfunding, because if it's not interesting, then you can learn from that and move it, change it and develop it into something that might be interesting or funding worthy. If it is very interesting, then you're already there and live on Kickstarter, and you can obviously just to continue and raise the money for it. So I think that's those for me are the four main purposes of crowdfunding. But like I said, you can do them all at the same time, or you can just do them one at a time, or just focus on one goal.
Thanks. You've mentioned a couple of the crowdfunding platforms as you've gone through, but I'd be interested to hear a bit more in detail about each of them, really, Ben. Absolutely.
Well, there are dozens, even hundreds of crowdfunding platforms out there. There really, really are. And they range from, for very business centric, for sort of venture capital funding, or, first, second round seed capital, that sort of funding as well. But there are loads for creatives, for smaller companies, or, for instance, books, which we're going to look at in detail today, that, that I'd recommend sort of leaning towards. So yeah, the main platforms we're going to look at today are Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Pentium, and Unbound. So yeah, I've already mentioned a couple of those already, and also I've mentioned Pubslush, which is unfortunately closed down now. So that's one less. But the reason we're going to discuss these, essentially they are very, very publishing focused. In fact, Unbound and Pentium are all about books. Kickstarter and Indiegogo are pretty much the two largest crowdfunding platforms out there, but they do focus on books quite heavily. So yeah, let's kick off with Kickstarter, which I've already referred to as the big daddy of crowdfunding. And it essentially is, it's perhaps the most well-known platform out there. It was released in 2009, and since then, as of stats that they release every day, they've raised over $2 billion for creatives and companies and all sorts of people around the world. And that's a huge, huge amount of money that might have simply just sat in people's pockets. And think of all the projects that we couldn't have had and couldn't have funded without Kickstarter. So they fund a huge range of things, from films, which I've already mentioned, music, apps, comics, clothing, but also publishing and literature. We're talking, I think, from, in fact, a detail that was actually revealed in the LBF this week. Publishing is actually the third most popular category on Kickstarter. So, since its launch, it's raised over $77.52 million for for publishing and literary projects, which I think is brilliant. So, you know, that's just third behind music and sort of films and TV. So media in general, consumable media, is definitely, you know, the bread and butter of Kickstarter. That's what most people are interested in. It's got great organic traffic. You know, a huge amount of people will visit Kickstarter and just browse on a day-to-day basis. They'll find out, you know, what new projects are interesting, what they can invest in. So, you know, going back to your point about, do you need a funding before, you know, launching a crowdfunding project? Well, if you don't, and you are a debut author, then maybe Kickstarter might be the best choice for you, because of that exact reason. Is the fact that huge amounts of people are on the platform every single day. In terms of using it, again, if you're sort of you know, a bit more technophobe, or not really used to technology, or sort of worried about how these platforms might how complicated these crowdfunding platforms might be, don't worry, because Kickstarter, and to be honest, most of these platforms that we're going to look at, have a very easy to use dashboard, and that's obviously the setup, the during while your project is live, and obviously after your project has been funded as well. The dashboard is so simple to use, and there's loads of different functionality that you can use as well to keep you in contact with your backers, to help you analyze, you know, the stats of where your funding is coming from. So really, really easy. They're also really easy to contact if you do have a problem or a question, but they do guide you through the entire process. Kickstarter is also a platform where you do have to be approved. So you would obviously create your pitch and your project, submit that to Kickstarter. It will go through an approval process, and after, you know, if Kickstarter like it, that's when it will go live on the date that you set. So you do just have to be aware that they do have sort of a quality control measure, you know, on the site. Fees for Kickstarter, they take 5% of the funds raised, and they also do payment processing fees of sort of 3 to 5%. So it's sort of the lower end of the, you know, the platforms that we're going to look at. But yeah, and not a lot. You know, obviously we talked about these fees a moment ago. Not a huge amount really in terms of the overall money that you're going to raise, but you do have to bear it in mind. So yeah, that's essentially Kickstarter. I do urge you to go check it out. It's just kickstarter.com. And as soon as you land on the platform, you'll see exactly what I mean in terms of just the breadth of projects that you have there, and, you know, how exciting they all are, and how much, you know, some can actually raise. You know, some raise millions. They really, really do. So, you know, just have a look around and you'll get the idea of the platform very, very quickly. I'd say secondary to Kickstarter, we've got Indiegogo. I'd probably say it's Kickstarter's main rival. It was actually launched sort of around the same time as Kickstarter, and it does have a wider remit than Kickstarter. So it allows people to back creative projects like it does, like Kickstarter does rather, but also Indiegogo sort of sticks on companies, charities, causes, startups, and things like that. So, you know, if you are an investor as well as an author, you know, there's places to get stuck in. If you've got, you know, a literary charity, or maybe sort of a book or a publishing startup, again, Indiegogo might be really useful for you. I would say, you know, the success rate as well for those projects is around 34%. So that wider remit allows more projects to come in, which can, I think it has in this case, lowered the success rate. So to contrast that to Kickstarter, from, you know, stats taken and sort of aggregated over the years, Kickstarter says their success rate is about 50%. So Indiegogo, slightly lower success rate, but again, I think that's down to, you know, the breadth of the projects that are on there and the types of projects that are on there. But again, you know, very, very popular in the sort of consumable media areas rather, so publishing, film, TV, apps, music, all of that. Those are the sort of the top projects that Indiegogo funds. Now, the interesting thing with Indiegogo, and this is different to Kickstarter, is that with Kickstarter, you have to set a top level, and if you reach that, great. If you come in a couple of pounds below that, let's say you're aiming for £5,000, as I did with my graphic novel, and you raise 4,995, this is obviously by the time limit. When it runs out, you don't get any money. That's the thing with Kickstarter. Indiegogo is slightly different. In fact, it's very different in the fact it will pay out on partially funded projects, and this is what's called flexible funding. It incurs a slightly higher fee, 9%, and that's obviously the fee that they take out of your raised monies, but it allows you to sort of get close to it and not lose everything. Obviously, if you would go with Kickstarter and you get just the way there, but you haven't quite funded, all the money goes back to the backers and you sort of have to start again. So you do take that gamble with Kickstarter, but that's where your marketing and the strength of your project and your rewards comes in, and also the length of your time limit comes in as well. So you do have to bear these things in mind and sort of really put a lot of thought into, you know, how good is my project? How strong is it? How much can I market? Are my rewards, you know, interesting and compelling enough? And most importantly, do you reckon I can do that all in the time limit that I set, essentially? So, you know, you do have to bear that in mind. With Indiegogo, however, you do have this flexible option. So if you want to get halfway and that's good enough for you, then don't worry, you can do that, and not your, you know, all of your money will come to you rather than going back to the backers. So just something to bear in mind in terms of the main difference. Indiegogo has raised more than $800 million to date. In the last year, again, talking about, you know, the organic traffic that we've got on these sites, over 117 million people have visited Indiegogo since its launch, and in the last year it had 2.5 million contributors, and that's just in 2015. So again, huge amounts of organic traffic. So again, if you don't have a following, Indiegogo is big enough that your project will be seen on the site and hopefully funded from people you don't know, at least a little bit. And the good thing is as well with Indiegogo is the projects don't have to be approved, so there's no submission process and approval process, so you can just put things on. And again, I think that probably has lowered the success rate over the last couple of years. Again, as I've said, varied and wide project types, so if you're slightly in a left field and it is technically publishing but it might be a different form of book or an experiment, Indiegogo might be more for you. And the good thing is as well, similar with Kickstarter, is that on your rewards you can offer multiple or bulk quantities of a reward as well, which is really, really clever. Again, great dashboard, really, really easy to launch, really, really simple before, during and after your projects as well. And the fees slightly different to Kickstarter. We got 4% off the top of your funded amount. 9% for part-funded projects, as we've already talked about, and again, their payment processing fees are about 3 to 5%. So yeah, again, Indiegogo and Kickstarter, choice is completely up to you. Pretty much the same, but a few key differences there. You can check out Indiegogo at indiegogo.com. That's Indie as in Indie Author, INDIE. GOGO.com. So yeah, those are the two main ones. Now I'd like to just look at a couple of others basically that we've got which are dedicated solely to books and to publishing. So those are Unbound and Pentium. So a lot of people might have heard of Unbound and Pentium before. For instance, we had a great talk on crowdfunding from John, one of the co-funders of Unbound, this week at LBF. So hopefully some of you caught that. Really, really good. Now, Unbound seems it's a smaller platform, as Pentium is as well, and both of them will not only help you fund a project, but they will actually help you edit, design, and produce the finished product for you. They even print it and do some marketing for you. So you're looking at sort of not only a funding platform, but also a polishing and production and publishing platform as well. So really, really useful. They see about 15 projects a month. This is Unbound, and had about 2 million in pledge revenue over the years. So yeah, slightly smaller in terms of Indiegogo and Kickstarter, but that's because they're just focusing on one niche area, i.e. publishing it and literature. So yeah, that's something to expect. They are UK based, and there is a submission process, so you do have to make sure that your manuscript gets past their approval. But they welcome submissions from all authors. You know, that's indie, that's traditional, debut authors, experienced authors. So you've got no worries of about who you are. You can always submit. I would say, you know, with Unbound, they would prefer a full manuscript, again, because what you're doing here is you're actually putting that manuscript in front of people and they go, I like that idea, I like the start of this book, I'm really interested to see how this turns out. Yes, we'll fund it. So it's similar in terms of concept, but don't forget, you're sort of it's also, well, it's more similar to sort of almost a pitching of an agent to a publisher or an author to an agent, in a sense, where it's solely based on your manuscript, your ideas, and also what you're intending to do with that manuscript. So that's where it's slightly different in terms of the platforms that we've got here. So yeah, like I said, like Pentium, they also edit, design, produce the finished product for you as well. So that could be a solution for you if you're worried about the self-publishing process. If you're new to it and confused by it, this might be a really interesting way to go. You can fund yourself and then get your book out there at the same time. So yeah, Unbound, again, very, very similar to Pentium. Pentium, as we've already talked about, does it on an equity-based model. So as Unbound does rewards, Pentium does it on a shared royalty basis, which, as I've already said, is really, really interesting. Really, really exciting, especially given that we're seeing differences in sort of the publishing model more and more as time goes on. Yet they also manage, like Unbound, they will manage the editing, the production of it, the distribution. They also manage the business and legal requirements as well, and make sure you have the widest possible distribution for your work. So across, Ingram Spark or Ingram's a distribution network, at least you're looking at Barnes and Noble, Kobo, Amazon. Your book will appear there if you're successful in your funding. And yeah, essentially, there's a lot of opportunity here to get your book funded and have it produced at the end of it as well. A little stat that I think is quite interesting, that Pentium authors on average between sort of $800 and $400 in their first 3 years, which is sort of, I would say, towards the lower end of the scale, I think, in terms of your professional indie authors. However, it's a great start, and Pentium will be able to work with you, and Unbound as well. They are sort of partners in as well as crowdfunding platforms. So you can work with them, like you would a publishing platform, or a self-publishing provider rather, such as Silverwood Books or Acorn or Clays. So I think it's really, really interesting what these two platforms are doing in comparison to the bigger ones such as Kickstarter and Indiegogo. I think they're definitely worth a look. Mainly, again, because of what I've just said in terms of their added on production and publishing services, but also because they are sort of slightly niche. And that's essentially it. So those are 4 main ones. A lot of information there. Yeah, my advice would just be to go check them out, essentially. And also, I'll be hot seating afterwards if you've got any other questions.
Thank you. Fascinating. We've almost got hybrid publishing as well as hybrid authors now.
Absolutely, yeah. We're actually, that's the amazing thing about those two platforms, is that it is a publishing opportunity as well as a funding opportunity. I think it's really, really clever. And I've been watching both platforms with a lot of interest over the last sort of year and a half, if not more. And they, again, are increasing in popularity all the time.
How can you be successful at doing this?
That is the key question, isn't it? That's the thing. I mean, obviously, yeah, up until this point in the talk, we've been looking at just how easy it is to use these platforms and to upload, and the benefits and possibilities and opportunities that they provide. But yeah, the trick is essentially you have to obviously not only get through the approval process, but you have to be successful in your funding. So yeah, that is the key to it, and this is where, as I said earlier, this is where the real work comes into. This is where we come into the real work. I think, one of the quotes I picked up from LBF this week was by John Mitchinson, the co-founder of Unbound, and I think he was talking specifically about his platform, but I think it really holds true for crowdfunding in general. And he basically said the more engaged the author is, the more the book will be funded. And I think that's spot on, really, because you do have to work very, very hard during the time that your project is live. You also have to work reasonably hard before it as well. So if we look at this in sort of a calendar, for my graphic novel, I launched it just into January, I think it was. So I was obviously working and producing the format, producing the project and doing the pitch for about a month or two beforehand, arranging things like guest posts, interviews, blog tours, tweets, campaigns, everything, all the media that I was going to share. That was all done beforehand. And then obviously during the 40 days that I had it live, it was all about just pushing that guest post out, emails, getting in contact with people, social media, everything. So it's similar to when you actually are producing a book. You have to work as hard at crowdfunding as you would do at the launch of your new book, a specific campaign that you were doing about your book. You have to work as hard as you would do with anything else, if not harder. So, and that's the first thing I'd say, is don't just think you can put a crowdfunding project up there and just watch the money roll in. Exactly the same as if you can't just put a book onto Amazon and just watch it rise up to the bestseller lists organically. You do have to put some work in. So I've got pretty much 4 tips to give you success, to give you an idea of what's needed. Maybe 5 actually, because I'm going to sort of mix and match them. Cool. So the first one is basically you have to ask yourself is your project worth it? And I think this is a good first step in being successful with crowdfunding. You have to really think about whether it has the wow factor. Because if it doesn't, as we've already looked at, it may struggle to get funded, you know. And the thing is, Kickstarter sees a lot of these where it's sort of there'll be a project that doesn't have what they refer to as the wow factor, as the sort of like secret recipe of cool, is what I call it. And it's really difficult to pin that down. So apologies first off, but it's that sort of je ne sais quoi, the sort of, you know, that's really cool reaction that someone has when they're looking at a project. That could be an idea, that could be a fully rounded prototype product, like a new watch, new belt, new hat, whatever. Headphones, you know, that was one of the famous projects off of Indiegogo this year, was a sort of cat-shaped headphones with LEDs all around them, which are really, really cool. But I mean, that no one could have predicted that sort of thing. You know, and it's just one product that people looked at and went, yes, I want those, they're amazing. And so it's that sort of thing that you really have to try and gauge, and it's hard to do so. It's hard to predict whether your product or idea or book will have that cool or wow factor. But the idea is that you just really have to sort of road test it, maybe with friends and family, through social media beforehand, to see if you can sort of really narrow it down or really define it. Or if you don't have the wow factor, you know, from the feedback, and see if you can inject some of that wow factor into it. So that's the first step, really, is seeing if you can, if your project has the excitement, has the interest, and has the funding potential that other projects on Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Unbound, and Pentium have. So that is the first tip for being successful. Really, really analyze your project, be brutal with it, and if you find it lacking, tweak it and make it better. Yeah. Cool. You have to, the second tip I've got for you is you have to make it compelling. So, you know, even if your book does sort of reside at the bottom end of the cool or the wow, you know, spectrum, you can still sort of get around that, or, you know, boost your project's potential with the idea of the story behind it. So you might have, let's say you're writing a book about your personal story. Maybe you've had a fantastic, really interesting life, or you've overcome a huge amount of adversity, or, you know, maybe this has been a dream of yours for a long time. You know, either way, if there's a story behind your project, by all means, talk about it. You know, use that. You know, talk about your love for your art. You know, the dream that you have. You know, even if it's just that, even if it's just, I really want to get this book out, even if it's just, you know, that's the one goal that drives you, tell people about it. You know, crowdfunding is all about selling not just the product and helping things to come to life, but also helping people engage with you and be part of your dreams or your goals. You know, definitely more so in the equity side as well. But that's why rewards work so well, because, you know, people feel that they can get something that they've helped create. So tell people why you want to create it. You know, people will also want to know where their cash is used. So, you know, as well as conveying your dream, you know, and sharing your, you know, your feelings and your personal drive behind it, tell people exactly where you're going to use the money. So don't obviously say something along the lines of, you know, 50% of this money will go on a holiday from getting over the work of Kickstarter, because that's not going to go down well. It really isn't. So, you know, definitely be very, very open about your passion, but also where your money is going to be used. For instance, you can break it down in sort of a budget. You know, X% of this amount will be used on publishing, this amount will be used on the editing, this amount will be used on etc. Obviously, you don't need to do that as much with Unbound and Pentium, because they will obviously take that on for you. However, with Kickstarter and Indiegogo and a couple of other platforms, yeah, you really do need to break it down. And the best projects and the most successful projects on Kickstarter and Indiegogo are the ones that not only have the great ideas, but they have the great people behind them. Just, you know, really talking about their cause, their passion, and being really open and clear about where they want to take the project. So that's something I definitely recommend. You know, so I want to see, you know, I want to see you all just essentially sharing, if you're ever going to do crowdfunding, sharing your hopes and dreams. Not too much, don't go into, you know, a 3,000 word story, but just be open about it. Cool. So the next tip that I want to share with you is the rewards. Okay, so reward your backers appropriately. This is a huge, 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 I cannot say that enough, part of crowdfunding. You know, again, we've already talked about the passion, we've already talked about the wow factor, the concept. Yes, all of those will contribute towards your target, but the rewards are a huge part of that. They really are. So what you want to do is see if you can spread out your rewards at the same time as making each reward something that's incredibly cool and something that's, you know, has that want factor with it. So what I would normally suggest is seeing if you can reach up for, so reach from, you know, very, very low amounts to help people who just want to put maybe a couple of pounds or a tenner behind your project, you know, the very quick and easy sort of backing. And that's going to be, you know, your sort of, your foundation, if you will, or sort of where most of the money will come from is the, you know, higher number of lower backings or bids. And then you sort of want to move up through the scales to, you know, your £20, your £30, 50, 60, 70 mark, you know, and obviously increase the rewards accordingly through then. And then you have your sort of top end, I'd recommend, where you want to facilitate for the people who have a lot of money to invest, that want to put a load of money on your project. So you're looking at sort of, you know, the 200, 500, even up to 1,000 marks. So I'd say have your sort of your increments, your lower increments, have quite a few of them, and then just have it sort of thinning out in terms of the gaps up to your really, really high amounts. So that is usually a good way of doing it. Bear in mind as well that the rewards should be should have a sort of perceived value of the actual amount as well. So for instance, if you're saying that you can back my project for £10 and I'll give you a badge for that, you might be thinking, well, the badge is probably about 20p's worth. It's nice, it's a nice badge, you know, that's great, but I don't really feel that I'm getting my money's worth, really. Again, that, you know, the rest of the £10 might be made up by the concept and the wow factor and the passion factor, if you can call it that. But I always like to see if I can you know, essentially provide the same monetary value, or at least the same perceived monetary value for the amount that you're asking for. So let's say for £10, I might offer a couple of ebooks or a physical copy if the unit costs work out. And essentially, yeah, just to provide something that people can say, I feel good about spending this £10. Now, obviously, do be aware that you will have to, especially Kickstarter and Indiegogo and Unbound, actually pay for these rewards. So you will have to facilitate the delivery, the creation of these rewards. So don't go crazy and say, yeah, for £10, I'll give you 2 paperback books, because once you've sort of printed those books, posted them, you're probably going to be over the £10, which means you're technically losing money. So you know, you do have to, this is why I'm talking about perceived monetary value. You sort of have to provide enough in the reward for the person who's backing, but obviously enough that you're actually making money and raising money for your project overall. So there is a bit of math to work out, a bit of finance to really to figure out before you go into a crowdfunding project. Something else I'd say as well is rewards. You know, you have such an opportunity to be very, very creative. So not only can you be creative with your project, but you can be really, really creative with the rewards. And that, you know, for instance, for the graphic novel, something that I did was actually offer people the chance to be drawn into the novel as a character, which went down incredibly well. And I put that up sort of, I think it was around £60 that you can actually get that reward for. So it's sort of out of the lower end, sort of in the middle. Not too high that it wouldn't be unfeasible for a lot of backers, for the majority of backers, but something that people go, yeah, I want that. I'll pay a little bit more for that. And at the same time, obviously, they're getting all the previous rewards as well. They're getting, you know, ebook copies, a paperback copy, you know, mentions, etc., on the website and in the back of the book. So a range of things, and that's how rewards should sort of stack up. But yeah, so that was something I used to really, really get the interest, and also use that as a bit of a marketing technique as well, to say, fancy being in my new graphic novel, fancy seeing your face in print, you know, custom artwork, apply here, you know, fund me. And that worked incredibly well. So you can, you know, really, really push the boat out, really just think outside the box. And maybe, you know, I've already mentioned one, dinner with the author is always fun if you're sort of crowdfunding in one country at least. You know, other things that you can do, artwork again. You could give away, you know, character names, that sort of thing in your book. You could ask, you know, for the chance to have your name as a name place, as a place name on a map or something. You know, you can really, really think big and originate really with this. And I think, you know, that's what benefits and rewards the people that do projects, is if they really, really think about what they're offering backers. And again, it just gives you a chance to really solidify that relationship between your backers, your new fans, as well as any existing fans that are backing you, and to really sort of, you know, provide them with an enjoyable experience. They go, oh, I'm so pleased I backed this, and they're sharing it all and they're doing some of the marketing for you. Yeah, so hopefully that makes sense. The last tip that I have for you is to basically, well, that's one of the last, I've got a couple, just conscious of time, is a video. Videos, so important. Kickstarter will talk, you know, all the way through setting up the project, will constantly offer you the chance to do a video. They recommend it. They've written blogs about how important they are. Indiegogo is the same, and you know, you should take the same practice to Pentium and Unbound as well. The reason being is that text is all well and good. You know, I could have delivered this talk in, you know, in a blog form, but it's a lot more interesting, hopefully, sitting here and you know, looking at someone talking about it, or listening to someone talking about it. So, you know, that's what a video lends. It lends that extra personality, the chance for you to convey that passion that we talked about just a moment ago, and to just, you know, put a face to a project. And, you know, videos we've seen in marketing all the time, you know, videos are incredibly important to marketing in general over text and image content. They have better conversion rates, they have better share rates. You know, you only need to look at the Facebook video statistics that came out a couple of months ago to see that videos are, you know, incredibly popular, and that's that Facebook sees about 8 billion video views a day. You know, so if you're just doing it in text and image, fair enough, but videos are going to get across your point and your personality and your passion, and also more importantly, your concept, better than anything else will, and also convert more as well. So that's why videos are so important. Cannot really say that enough. And yeah, the other thing I want to say is basically, you know, sort of echoing what we said before, is don't assume that your project will fund itself. Really don't. You do need to put a lot of work into this. So, you know, in terms of making it successful, every day you need to be, in fact, no, before your project is live, as I said, you need to be lining up marketing opportunities, you know, step by step for every day that your project is live. So it may feel like you're bothering a lot of people for that 40 days of your project. I certainly felt like I was, but at the end of it, I've got £5,500 and a graphic novel on the shelf now. So, you know, it was a lot of work, but it is beneficial and it is very worth it. But you just can't assume that just, you know, the organic traffic, even though it's as great as we talked about earlier on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, you can't just assume that that's enough. You really need to put a lot of work in. So yeah, like I said, look at guest interviews, look at writing blogs, look at doing guest blogs, do videos about, you know, your progress, do regular updates, use social media, you know, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, anything that you can do to get your project seen, to get people going to your project page, the better. So yeah, you do need to put a huge amount of work in, as much work as you can put in throughout the time that your project is live, before it, and also afterwards. You want to, you know, shout about the fact that you've funded, and then, you know, think about it this way: is that if you've got a short gap between being funded and the project being out there on the shelves, or your book being out there on the shelves, then you're gonna, you know, that post-project marketing will help people start get interested in the actual product, and even though they might have missed out on funding, they can still get their hands on the final finished article once it's done and out there. So yeah, just, you have to put the work in. Never, ever, and ever underestimate crowdfunding and the amount of work, especially when, let's say if you're using Kickstarter and you just get to that bit underneath but you don't quite make it. So think what an extra guest blog could do, or think what an extra tweet here and there could have done. So yeah, that's essentially my my top tips.
Thank you very much, Ben. That's fascinating. I hope all of you got as much out of that as I did. I must admit, I've neglected crowdfunding, and maybe it's something that I should start looking at. So
I hope you've got lots of ideas now, David.
Oh yeah. Always lots of ideas.
It is a very sorry, just to quickly summarize what you just say. I just think it's a very interesting opportunity. We're going to see more and more of it over the coming years. And I just think it's just opportunities, a new thing that authors can use in lots of different ways. So yeah, hopefully that has been hopeful, give you some ideas.
Thank you very much, Ben. We've been talking to Ben Galley for Indie Author Fringe, and Ben will be hanging around the hot seat session for a little while after this. So any questions for him, just jump over there and throw them at him. He's more than capable of handling.
That's it. I'll be there for the next half an hour or so, and checking in throughout the day as well. And just very quickly, if anyone wanted to find me, you can find me at bengalley.com or on Twitter at Ben Galley. That's Galley.
Thank you very much, Ben. Goodbye.
Thank you, David. See you soon.